Hi everybody, I hope you can see me and of course indeed hear me. And I'll give you a second to, a little bit windy over here, so if there's a bit of noise on the microphone, don't worry too much. We will kind of move away and hopefully, hello running in. I'll just give you all a minute just to drop in, because I think I've come straight in after Lily, I think, was doing a tour, wasn't she? So hello Catherine, hello Susan. Hello Mark in Ipswich, good to see you. So do let me know when you join, and we'll get started in a minute. Hello Tish, hello Dawn. So a slight confession to make on this. What I thought was going to be a very dramatic start might be slightly kind of shall we say, not as dramatic as hoped, insofar as that I planned this tour for last weekend, and that was the thought was a bit late, but the Clifford's Tower daffodils are rather in rebate. But hopefully you'll see enough, but there's plenty on the city walls, so we'll see plenty of daffodils, don't worry. It's just I think these ones are planted, well, I'll tell you why they're planted a bit earlier. So consequently, they are not at their most majestic, but nonetheless, you can sort of see the numbers and you can sense. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about daffodils, all things daffodils, as we kind of walk around York in the evening sunshine. It's a bit colder, I thought it was going to be as well, so I'm glad I've got this thicker jumper on. But hopefully you are warm and comfy and cosy wherever you are. So lovely Tish, good to see you all as well. As I say, if we'd come here 2 weeks ago, this hill I'm going to show you would be a right of colour. There's still loads of daffodils, but it's just they are rather looking a bit sorry for themselves. But as I say, the ones on the city walls, much less so. So don't worry, there will be a bounty of flowers as we go around. So good-o. So I think we're about on time. So if we are all set and ready to play, a little windy, absolutely. Hello, Satya. We will kick off. So daffodils. Let's try and find a daffodil, because as I say, it's spin round a little bit underwhelming. Has to be said over here, because they're all unfortunately on their kind of way out. But as I say, there's lots in York that aren't. But these ones are planted a bit early. But at least you can kind of get a sense of how many there are here. So daffodils with their kind of vibrant blooms and delicate fragrance are amongst the most beloved flowers of spring. And these cheerful blossoms have a kind of rich history that are laden with symbolic meanings that have captivated cultures throughout the ages. They're synonymous with York and its city walls, and so as we walk around the city and on the walls, we're going to delve into the fascinating world of daffodils, exploring their origins, physical characteristics, their symbolism, cultural significance, and more. So Trist, back in '86, remembers them. So yeah, these are not at their most impressive, but there's lots of them, but there are some on the walls that are a lot kind of earlier. So the daffodil is a flower of renewal and rebirth that reflects the pale spring sun as its delicate scent draws in the early wakening bees in search of life-giving nectar. And it all kind of sounds rather idyllic, doesn't it? Yet the kind of daffodil also holds dark secrets for those that delve into the mythology. From ancient Greece to modern symbolism, death hovers in the background of this uncertain spring. So there are a few around here, we'll see. A bit hungry, but yeah, we all know how that feels, right? So even the name daffodil, with its roots in the country folks affodil and daffodili, is a mask for the deadly narcissus, which is the true name for this genus. So sharing its linguistic roots with narcotic and narcolepsy, from the Greek narc, it warms of the paralytic numbness and intoxication that befall those who imbibe the sticky juices of the leaves, stems, or a bulb. So something of that darkness is reflected here, obviously, at the tower, because we start here today at Clifford's Tower with the remains of the 13th century castle, and the stone castle replaced an earlier castle made of wood that had been burned to the ground during the Jewish massacre here in 1190. So the daffodils at the historic Clifford's Tower, as well as sort of creating a picture-perfect scene, you have to kind of take my word for it there, I'll look at the photos. They were picture-perfect a couple of weeks ago, a little bit tired now. Also have this kind of significant meaning to them. So in 1992, 200,000 daffodil bulbs were planted to commemorate the 150 men, women and children of the Jewish. Oh, there's one that's managed to weather the storm. 150 people, obviously the Jewish faith, that were victims of the worst, one of the worst anti-Semitic massacres of the Middle Ages back in 1190. And it sort of said that the six-pointed flower echoes the Star of David, providing a kind of thoughtful memorial to the anniversary of this massacre, which is commemorated on the 16th of March every year. Now, if you're interested and want to learn more about that, go over on my channel. 2 weeks ago, I did a tour with Dr. Louise Hampson about York's medieval history, covering 1190 and lots more besides. So if you haven't already checked that out, I do encourage you to do so. So we'll try and come a bit earlier next year, but as I say, these were planted to be kind of ready for the 16th of March. So we're also getting on for, I suppose, almost not quite a month later, are we? But we're a good sort of few weeks later. So there's a few more up here you can see. It's a brave little bloom, absolutely. And there's a few more there just kind of hanging in there. It must be lonely. There's just a few. I know, don't have them. So let's get a walk on and we'll go down by the walls where there's certainly kind of a lot more we can see. So despite the links to 1190, it's clear that daffodil planting doesn't go back centuries in York's history. And I kind of wanted to find out where it all began, because lots of people talk about York and they'll mention, oh, you must go in spring when the daffodils are out. And I kind of wonder, well, where did that kind of all start? What kind of was the thinking behind it, really? Why daffodils and kind of why York, and what was that kind of connection? And I genuinely didn't know, so it was kind of nice to sort of set myself a question that I didn't really kind of know the answer to. Hello, Polly. And according to local research, the first bulbs were planted as long ago as 1949, when youth organisations, I'm going to walk across now towards the walls, donated 18,000 bulbs to the city, which kind of sounds a lot, but now that we know that there's 200,000 planted on this kind of mound alone, it gives you a sense of actually how many sort of bulbs are there now. And it seems that they originally all planted around Wormgate Bar. And we've got an image, but you have to say, a bit like kind of watching snooker in black and white, a photo of daffodils in black and white doesn't really kind of cut it. But there you go. That gives you a sense of what it was like maybe in the 1950s, very sort of early on. But it certainly takes something away. I think you'll agree. There's a photo of black and white daffodils. But there we go. We do our best. We can't... I suppose we could retouch and colour them, couldn't we? But I think that's a little bit enough, if I'm being totally honest with you. So then apparently in 1968, the park superintendent at the time, Mr. Eric Shirley, expressed the view that he would kind of like to see daffodils kind of circle the walls. That was his kind of ambition, if you like, during his career ambition, was to see them go all the way round the walls. And so he planted a further 14,000 bulbs between Fishergate, Poston and Wormgate. And it's thought that by 1973, the ring around the walls was largely complete. But much to the frustration of the Parks Department, they don't flourish uniformly, and there's places where decades later they're still kind of rather sparse. Any gardeners amongst you will know that, of course, the places that get the full sunlight and the early sunlight and late sunshine do a lot better than those that don't. So consequently, it's not going to even spread around the city. But nonetheless, there's anything very kind of satisfying, and of course, photographers will kind of focus in on where they're kind of densest. So don't think actually it's quite the carpet that you kind of led to believe in some of the photos, but there are areas, of course, where they really do flourish indeed. And there's thousands and thousands that come to sort of full bloom and do create this carpet of yellow around the walls every year. So kind of many, it's sort of a local tradition really to kind of look out for the first daffodil coming out on the bar walls, the city walls. Kind of a sense that spring is on its way, a bit like hearing the kind of first cuckoo. So it's a sign that we've got to the end of a long winter, and that we're now, on our way back. The sun's tilted back towards, or we tilted back towards the whatever it is that happens in the equinoxes, and longer, warmer days are ahead of us. So let's walk round. I think we'll go up for a little walk on the walls, and of course we should. It's lovely evening sundawn, and I think we'll talk about the history and the mythology behind this, which I do a bit of research about. It's a story you're half familiar with, the story of kind of Narcissus. You sort of know a bit, but then I realised I didn't really know why or what, or kind of what had gone on there. So I thought I'd kind of research and tell its story, because look how apt is it really. Come back to look at daffodils. Let's hear the story behind them. So daffodils, scientifically known as narcissus, trace their roots back to ancient Greece and Rome. And the ancients loved to sort of spin myths around the daffodil, basically. And they tell how this liminal plant grew at the threshold to the underworld, the afterlife, where Proserpina is snatched while gathering daffodils, leaving her mother distraught. Her mother is Ceres, the goddess of grains and the harvest. And she plunges the world into winter for a month every year, so she can go down to the underworld to search for a daughter. Even where winter comes from, it's to do with daffodils. So Proserpina, the daughter, was out collecting daffodils when she was snatched and dragged to the underworld. So the name Narcissus is derived from a Greek mythological character, Narcissus, a young man who fell in love with his own reflection. So as they're coming on this side, this is not one of the sunniest sites. There's not loads, but they are certainly in a lot healthier state than those you've been exposed to. In case you're worried you're going to well, is any live daffodils on this tour whatsoever, I can assure you there's plenty on this side. And the further round we get towards the station, they will get denser and denser. But how nice to be able to see them looking at their best. So we've got quite a few on here, so I think we'll walk along and we'll point down. So some councils are too quick to mow where daffs are. Nearly 6 weeks on water, let the foliage die and return the good to their bulbs. Interesting, Susan. It's always interesting to hear from horticulturists and green finger folk on here to add to the texture and the richness of our shared knowledge. So let's talk about Narcissus, because I suspect that, like me, many of you will know the name but not know so much really about his character, kind of where he kind of came from and what stories and myths are associated with him. So Narcissus, then, is a figure renowned in Greek mythology who was the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liope. And like lots of good old-fashioned mythology, when I say father and mother, she's the victim of a rape. So he's known for his striking beauty. Narcissus captured the hearts of many, yet he met each admirer with nothing but disdain and contempt. And this unyielding pride in his appearance set the stage for his tragic fate. It's a great story, and so with many of the myths and legends, it contains truths that are just as kind of relevant to the modern age as to the ancient one. So I thought I'd share it with you. And as we do, we'll try and peek down and look at yellow daffodils from time to time as we go past. So there's a number of different versions and sources for this story, but the best known version is a story in the Roman poet Ovid, and the publication's called Metamorphosis. And this is the story of Echo and Narcissus. So in Ovid's narrative, the framing revolves around the test of the prophetic abilities of Tiresias. Some very difficult names in here. I hope you recognise the effort it's taken me to kind of get my head around this story. So he was a seer, was Tiresias. He was an individual who'd experienced life as both a man and as a woman. And his sight was taken from him during a dispute between Juno and Jove, man and wife gods. Siding with Jove led to his blinding by an enraged Juno. In compensation for his lost sight, Jove granted him the gift of prophecy. And that prophecy solidified Tiresias' reputation. And this story of Echo and Narcissus is the closing of the deal to demonstrate that he had these skills in abundance. So after being, I think ravaged is the sort of polite word, is it you'd use probably rather than raped, but it amounts to the same kind of thing. Taken against her will by the river god Cephissus, the nymph, Liope, gave birth to Narcissus, who was beautiful even as a child. Now, as was the custom, she consulted the seer Tiresias about the boy's future, and he predicted the boy would live a long life, but only if he never came to know himself. So hold that thought. He's not allowed to know himself. So there we go. Hopefully bit more carpeting down here. We're beginning to deliver on the name of a daffodil tour. So Narcissus grew to become a handsome young man, and he took up the trade of a hunter who travelled far and wide to seek out his prey. And he encountered many people who were left speechless as to his physical beauty. But Narcissus rejected the advances of all the men and the women who approached him. And don't forget, of course, that the Greeks were a good deal, well, perhaps as relaxed as we are now in contemporary society about homosexuality, but a good more so relaxed than perhaps people have been in previous generations, shall we put it like that, and leave it there. So, it didn't really much matter that both men and women found Narcissus attractive. It was simply a measure of his stunning physical beauty. So during his 16th year, so he's still only 15 actually, after getting lost while hunting with friends, Narcissus came to be followed by a nymph, and her name was Echo. So Echo was a mountain nymph, and like Tiresias, had a sensory ability altered after an argument between Juno and her husband Jove. So if there's one thing we can learn from this story is do not get involved between Juno and Jove. It will not end well for you, unless you don't mind being blinded, or everyone knows whatever else that happened. So Echo had kept Juno occupied with gossip, while Jove had an affair behind her back. So as a punishment, Juno took from Echo her agency in speech. So Echo was thereafter never able to speak unless it is to repeat the words of another. See where you're coming from? Echo, right? So Echo was never thereafter able to speak unless it was to repeat the last few words of those she'd heard. Did anybody know this, or did anybody know that this is the kind of the root of the story of echoes? So Echo had deceived using gossip. She'd kept Jove's wife busy with tittle-tattle while he was off carrying on, ravaging, no doubt, other nymphs and maidens and assorted ladies and girls within his reach. So because she kind of deceived using gossip, she becomes condemned to be only that from then on. Okay, so all she could do is repeat what had been said by others. So as Echo followed Narcissus through the woods, she yearned to speak to him. But because she was cursed by Juno, she could only repeat the words of others, which made her unable to express her love for him. You can kind of see how it's kind of frustrating. That's a nice shot. Look at that one. Isn't that beautiful? So she's now following. She's obsessed with Narcissus. She's going to fall head over heels with him as Echo. He's lost, but as yet he hasn't said anything. So consequently, there's nobody else there, so she can't repeat their words. So she's kind of following him in silence, stalking him, really, for want of a better, to use a kind of contemporary expression. So Echo merely follows him, kind of filled with longing, waiting for him to speak, so that her feelings might be heard. So Narcissus now senses he's being followed, and he shouts. Can you imagine what? Probably you can guess what he shouts. Anybody have a guess as to what Narcissus shouts at this moment in time? To Echo. Somebody's following him. Doesn't know who he is. He's in the woods. Ricola. Cole, it's a good guess. I'm glad that's what you say. It wasn't what Narcissus said. He shouted, of course, "Who's there?" And what did he hear back? "Who's there? Who's there? Who's there? Who's there?" So this interaction can repeated "who's there" multiple times from Echo, of course. And as the echo was kind of playing out, Echo, that's right, Lizzie, tiptoed close until she could see Narcissus close up. But in doing so, she kind of revealed herself, and so that she then attempted to embrace him. Narcissus was horrified by this. He kind of steps back and told her to keep her chains. Heartbroken, Echo wasted away, losing her body amidst lonely glens, until nothing of her could be seen, only a voice. It was only the echo that remained. Good story. We haven't even finished this story, but isn't that sounds like a story within a story? But it's fabulous. I never knew any of that. The story of how Echo came to be an echo. Unrequited love. So Nemesis. Here's another name that you've probably heard of. Nemesis. What do we say about Nemesis? Someone's enemy. It's a Nemesis. Of course, he's one of the gods. She's the goddess of, guess what? Retribution. So she's observing this, of course. She knows what's going on, and she sees what Narcissus is up to. And she's also heard the pleas of another young man called Emilius, who's come to see her to say that he'd approached Narcissus and had been cruelly spurned with harsh words, sent away with a flea in his ear, I think you'd say. So Arminius had fallen for Narcissus, but was ignored and cursed by him. So Nemesis listens to this, and she proclaims that Narcissus would never be able to be loved by the one he fell in love with. And I think you can probably see now where this story is going. Nemesis, yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the words that we have, so many of the words that we have, rather, of course, from Greek and Roman mythology, which I absolutely adore. I am a huge fan. I came from studying Latin as a kid, and so rather than like doing French, where you'd study stories up on camping holidays and at the supermarket, boring as hell, we used to do classical mythology. And so you'd actually want to find out what happened. It's quite a good way to get kids to want to learn Latin, is give them a good story, get them to have to translate it. No Googling those days, of course. We couldn't find out about Ceres and Proserpina, and Nemesis, Juno, Jove, and all these people. So you have to actually get your Latin dictionary out, translate it word by word, and kind of fashion a narrative from it. So that's how I came to fall in love with this mythology. And we say Greek and Roman mythology, often effectively it's the same word. So for instance, Nemesis is Hera in Roman and Greek. It's the same gods, they just give different names to them. So it's pretty interchangeable, but they have these kind of different names. Just go with it, just kind of accept it. There's not really much difference in Roman and Greek mythology. So after spurning Echo, and the young man Narcissus, Narcissus becomes thirsty. So Nemesis now leads him to a pool of water. It's a bit like, in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy is drawn to the witch's field. Remember is it poppies in that field? I can't remember what it is. But they're all kind of like, they've got a narcotic, haven't they, send them to sleep. Do you remember that bit in Wizard of Oz? I can't remember what flowers they are, but anyway, you guys will, because you're brilliant and all that stuff. So it's like that. So she basically draws him in. Dawn studied Latin as well. Good, eh? Veni Vidi Vici, all that lot. Came, saw and conquered. Went home for tea. So Nemesis, Narcissus now kind of finds himself, it's poppies, thank you, finds himself drawn to this kind of magical pool. And of course, Nemesis has really kind of created this, because Ovid makes it clear that no animal had ever taken water there. So I think what he's clearly saying is it didn't exist. He's brought into kind of reality at the whim of Nemesis as goddess of retribution for a very specific purpose. Or perhaps no animal had approached because they knew this was seriously bad news. So you probably maybe know this next bit. David, I'm very aware, yes, of Stephen Fry's books. They're very accessible about the gods and about the heroes. Absolutely recommend it. Check out for your local library, see if they've got a copy. Very, very readable. And a real page turners. These are great stories. And as I say, they are telling an apposite for our age too. It isn't simply stories about things that happened in centuries gone by. Of course, many of them will never have actually happened. But like Aesop's fables or the parables of the Bible, they have lessons that we can draw into the modern life and realise that they're really about the human nature, about how we are, how we behave, and the impact that has on others. So consequently, Narcissus leans down to drink, and of course, what does he see in this lake? He sees his reflection, and he finds it to be as beautiful as a marble statue. So unaware, he's so captivated, he's so vain, so narcissistic, which is kind of convenient, isn't it, being narcissist, that Narcissus had narcissistic tendencies, but he did. So unaware, kind of mirroring image, Narcissus falls deeply in love with it. And again, there's no critique that, a man should fall deeply in love with a man, particularly young men. So again, it's just sort of slightly different values, but kind of interesting that we got uptight about this stuff later, but originally, we didn't really care about such things. So Narcissus falls deeply in love with it, but then upon realising the truth, he's consumed with despair, understanding that his love could never be reciprocated. And this realisation leads him to taking his own life. And legend has it that from the place of his death sprang the Narcissus flower, a symbol of his self-obsession. Now, an intriguing aspect of the Narcissus myth is its kind of connection with the divine. So some version of this story suggests that Narcissus was the object not just of the affection of the nymphs and the mortals, but also some gods. He really was a hottie, you know. Nobody could resist Narcissus until they met him, because he's horrible. But, so again, this idea, do you know, of beautiful outside, ugly inside, you know, I think we all still see a lot of this kind of reality TV, don't we? Love Island and all these kind of things, you know, is what God gives on one hand, they take away on the other. Sometimes you get the complete package of people that are beautiful, talented, smart, athletic and nice, but there aren't many like that. So his kind of rejection of all those that loved him, including kind of divine beings, was seen as another great Greek word here, hubris. So hubris, before nemesis, there is hubris. I'm not going to talk about politics at this point, but you might cast a thought around who is perhaps in a state of hubris right now. We don't go there. So further kind of intensifies the god's desire for revenge. So again, a bit sparser here. Look. So you see how all gardeners would know that beautiful former hospital actually, of course, creates shelter. So you can plant as much as you like, but they ain't going to flower much there. But we go a few yards down past it, where of course the sun can get to, and suddenly, you know, we're kind of back in. So I think this idea of kind of the divine adds a kind of another layer to the story, kind of showcasing the consequence of rejecting not just human love, but also kind of divine affection. And of course that works through to a Christian message, doesn't it? You know, if we think about it, you know, God's love for us all, it's kind of, is there supposedly, you know, if we buy into the kind of the Gospels and so forth, we just have to accept Jesus into our hearts, you know, and it's kind of there for us. So kind of Narcissus is like that. So there's a kind of reflection, really. These stories really are kind of timeless. They're lessons, really. So it doesn't really much matter whether they actually happened or not, because almost certainly probably didn't happen. They're pretty unlikely. But nonetheless, you know, the love of vanity, you know, man's hubristic nature, the desire for power, for wealth, for all these kind of things, it drives us to a bad place. It doesn't kind of come from a good place. So the story of Narcissus, I think, serves a kind of powerful moral lesson across cultures and generations. It's a poignant reminder of the danger of excessive pride and vanity. Narcissus' fate demonstrates the peril of becoming overly absorbed in one's own images. Absolutely cold morality stories. They absolutely are. And they would have been understood. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily have that same cast of characters, but, you know, a medieval peasant would have understood this. You know, the way into heaven is not through serving your own interests, it's through saving God and your community. So these are timeless applications that aren't even particularly associated with one kind of belief system. You've kind of really got a universality, I suppose, is the way to kind of describe that. So his kind of excessive pride and vanity demonstrates the peril of becoming overly absorbed in one's own image and the importance of empathy and the recognition of others. So to me, his story has transcended time, continued to be relevant, and a cautionary tale about the consequences of self-obsession and the indifference to the feelings of others. And I'm going to come right out and say that, and say, unfortunately, I believe that President Trump displays many of these tendencies, who seems to want to be a celebrity first and a politician or leader sort of second. So the term narcissistic personality disorder has been termed to kind of diagnose extreme forms of this behaviour as a psychiatric illness. And the story has kind of continued as sort of inspired rather countless artists to paint scenes from the story, especially the scene with the lake. So let me just see if I can find, I've got that over here for you. So this is my favourite, even though it's by a kind of guy called one of the pre-Raphaelite artists, one of the lesser known ones, John William Waterhouse, and of course it shows Echo and Narcissus. So this is actually a little bit of mangling of the story, because you never actually got Echo and Narcissus at the pool at the same time, but kind of nonetheless, you know, you kind of see the kind of composition there, which kind of works really nice. And the story's also been widely used in literature. I'm not kind of sure if anybody will know, but if I said, what is the name of Oscar Wilde's only novel, I'm sure that many of you will... I'll give you a second there, so I'm trying to get rid of... Always slightly forget how to do that, but I don't think you can see it anyway. It is the chat as you speak, so I'm just trying to get rid of the picture. I think it's gone from your screen, but there we go. So it's kind of famously recycled by Oscar Wilde in the novel The Picture of Dorian Gray. And if you haven't read it, it's a great book. It's not very long. It's well worth a read. And it essentially, it's about a kind of young man that is so in love with himself. He has his portrait painted, but he doesn't really like the portrait so much. He ends up, can't quite remember exactly why, but he puts it up in the attic where it kind of can't be seen. But then something very, very strange happens. As the years go by and everyone around him naturally ages, Dorian Gray doesn't. But the portrait does. Maybe that's why I can't quite remember. If I'm mangling this to the Oscar Wilde aficionados out there, my intense apologies for getting this kind of so wrong. But obviously, again, it's this idea of the outer beauty and the inner sort of sense of the ugly, the kind of untamed. Daffodils have kind of inspired writers and artists of the centuries. My favourite poem about daffodils is not words. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But it's by A.A. Milne. It's called Daffodil, written by A.A. Milne, famous for his Winnie the Pooh stories. And the poem was published in the volume When We Were Very Young in 1924. And the verse goes, "She wore her yellow sunbonnet, she wore her greenest gown. She turned to the south wind and curtsied up and down. She turned to the sunlight and shook her yellow head and whispered to her neighbour, 'Winter is dead.'" So this poem captures the spirit of spring through the image of a daffodil. The daffodil is personified, in this case, as your woman. Remember, do our level poetry. She's wearing a yellow sunbonnet and a green gown, who turns to the south wind and curtsies up and down. And then the daffodil turns to the sunlight, shakes its yellow head, and whispers to its neighbour that winter is dead. So this kind of poem is typical of Milne's work in its simplicity and charm. And Milne was master at kind of writing poems that are accessible to children, which also contain deeper meanings. So in this poem, the daffodil is a symbol of hope and new beginnings. And this poem is also kind of representative of the time period in which it was written. So of course the early 20th century was a time of kind of great change and upheaval. World War I was kind of recently over, and the world was in the kind of midst of a period of social and economic change. So this poem kind of offers a sense of hope and renewal in the midst of all this change. And of course most of the children wouldn't have got that. It doesn't really much matter. But the fact that it is able to be a sort of a lovely rhyme that I know somebody, as soon as I said it, a straight, oh God, yeah, completely remember that. You know, that's going to really kind of part of my memories. I think we'll have a little walk. Should we have a walk off the walls now? And we'll look at it from downwards upwards. Let's do it that way. And because there's a lot of people going on the walls now, don't we? We're filming a lot of people from behind. Thanks to the 5 minutes. So the trouble with the walls, because it's kind of narrow, is the more people you get on it, the slower it gets. And then, it's a bit of a chore, to be honest. So I think we might go back on the walls. We'll see how we get on. What time are we on? We're already on 7:05, so a good chunk of this tour is all over. So I want to talk about the origins of the... Hope you enjoyed. That was kind of lengthy kind of excursion to the story of Narcissus and Echo, but I think it's a good story. I really like it, and I think it's one of those that not people know. So I thought it was well worth taking the time to do it justice and to fully understand its elements, the dramatis personae, as they say, and for us to kind of take a moment to think and reflect about it. So let us. This isn't perhaps ideal because of this bit, but nonetheless, what we can do, of course, is we need to cross over here, let's see, and we should be able to get once we get past the roadworks here. So, of course, this is the where they are, taking out the bridge here in York. So that work, since we last here, actually, it's going to come on a fair bit. It might not look like it to you, but incrementally, sort of stuff's getting done now, and it's getting a lot clearer to the end. And of course, what that's kind of meant is that, which we're going to see in a minute, is that more of the banks, if you like, of the walls, the earth banks that they kind of sit on, have been exposed on this site, taking the bridge out. So of course we get to see more daffodils. So it's a jolly good thing all round in that. It's kind of win-win. So let's go cross over and hopefully we can see a bit of something. If nothing else, you get to see York as it is, not a museum, but a living, breathing, evolving city. But there's a nice splash of yellow. So the Greek and kind of Roman legend of Narcissus gives a kind of strong indication of how long we've been kind of charmed by this kind of wonderful flower. So the Narcissus species are found in a variety of habitats in Europe and North Africa, ranging from kind of sea level to subalpine meadows. So it doesn't have a preference really. It's more about kind of sunlight and good drainage. So woodlands, rocky places. It thrives in mild climates with well-drained soil and ample sunlight. So there isn't any kind of one arena that you would say is ideal for kind of daffodils. So Spain hosts the greatest kind of variety of species, but they can also be found in Morocco, Portugal, Western France, Italy, and other countries around the Mediterranean. And daffodils were introduced to gardens, we think, around 300 BC. So these flowers were initially cultivated by the Greeks and the Romans for their beauty and their medicinal properties. The Roman apothecaries and later priests carried bulbs in their supplies and planted them wherever the army was stationed. So early medical texts show recipes for treating anything from cuts and bruises, digestive issues, using daffodils. So the flower was kind of noticed and shared by a Greek botanist known as Theophrastus, and he listed and described many of the earliest known kinds of Narcissus in his 9-volume inquiry into plants. So once we get around this corner, hopefully we can get to the other side and get back and bring the blooms into view. But as we come around here, you can see now the kind of shoring up that's going on to support the walls, because obviously the walls for many years had been supported by this bridge, so taking them away was kind of no mean engineering feat. But once that's all done and planted, of course, this time next year, we'll come down here and we're going to have terracing that will then give us another kind of plateau for viewing the fabulous daffodils. So this botanist studied in kind of great detail, and he'd kind of heard about this plant through the kind of dominant Roman army, and they kind of mesmerised the Romans by the beauty of this plant, and they believed daffodils to have kind of healing properties, but it's fair to say that they weren't really correct. They kind of believed a whole bunch of things, and this was rather incorrect. So after a close study, Theophrastus discovered they were in fact toxic to the skin, that when the sap of the daffodil touched the skin, they can cause mild irritation. So rather than it being kind of a thing of healing, it's problematic for most people, and as such they really shouldn't be ingested. So I'm just going to try and cross here so we can get back towards, if we can. I think we're more down there. The thing is, it changes all the time, so it's not easy to sort of say with authority, yes, we can go down there, because I'll get down there and we'll see that in fact we've then hello Natalie, that we've got more barricades in our way. But I would endeavour to bring you as close as I am able to. Are you going to slow down, let us see? This is York after all. It's a very nice place. Thank you very much. Nice taxi driver, you see. Girl in front, less nice. Nul point for that little bit of auto selfishness. So as such, you shouldn't ingest them, you shouldn't eat them. So in case you didn't know that, do not eat the daffodils. So the name, as was said, derives from the Greek word narco, which is the root of the word narcotic. And the etymology probably relates to the daffodils' toxicity, because all parts of the plant are poisonous. So the Romans are known to have planted daffodils in memory of loved ones and comrades who'd fallen in battle. And they likely brought them to Britain from the Iberian Peninsula, which of course is sort of Spain and Portugal. Predominantly, I say Spain and Portugal, where the large variety of daffodil species are found. Hello. And daffodils were brought to Britain by the Romans, who thought that the sap from daffodils had healing powers. So we're finally coming back into the site now where we actually see some daffodils, which is great. A bit crunch is running. So the sap actually contains crystals that can irritate the skin, so it's entirely possible that daffodils may have been a feature in Roman York. Now, isn't that amazing to think that, especially when we think about these walls are in essence kind of built upon the Roman walls, that the daffodils that we're looking at could be kind of predated by 2,000 years, and that whilst these would have been kind of wooden walls originally, then stone walls to the Romans, perhaps a bit lower down, because obviously the ground has risen up, but that we could have had daffodils in that time as well. So, I think that's lovely. Just going to have a sip of water. So isn't it lovely? Look at that beautiful sunlight. The difference between life and death for many. The croutons. Right. So daffodils are kind of symbolic, significant kind of symbolism in ancient cultures. In Greek mythology, they were associated with rebirth and new beginnings. They kind of represent the arrival of spring after the kind of harsh winter months. And daffodils were often linked to Persephone, who was the goddess of spring. So as her kind of return marked the rejuvenation of nature. And to this day, they're one of the first blooms, of course, at the end of winter. And daffodils have become symbols of rebirth and new beginnings. Wordsworth said, "And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils," which is just, how can you write? How can that line ever not have been written? It feels like it just sort of fall out organically, doesn't it? I mean, I'm sure he had lots and lots of goes before he just got that down, but it is so perfect a couplet that you just gasp at times of the talent of some people and their ability to put words together. So I'll say that again. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. It's pure nectar. William Wordsworth, check him out. He's well worth the effort. And not at all a difficult read. So who can argue with that sentiment? But also daffodils symbolise other things. Daffodils are associated with new beginnings and transformation. But just as these flowers emerge from the cold earth, they serve as a reminder for the potential for growth and change within ourselves. Daffodils encourage us to leave behind the past, embrace personal growth, and embark upon new journeys with courage and optimism. The daffodils may also be symbols of creativity, energy, resilience, forgiveness, and vitality. In Victorian England, daffodils were given as gifts to express admiration and respect. In literature, the daffodil is often used as a symbol of unrequited love and hope. Now, by the late 19th century, the Victorian era, there were thousands of types of daffodils, thanks to a man known as the Daffodil King. Now, born in a small village by the Clyde, so near Glasgow, Peter Barr, who was born in 1826, died in 1909, traversed the world in search of new plants. But his heart was in the daffodil. So he founded nurseries in Tooting in London and Long Ditton in Suffolk, and he spent his days amongst the daffodil collections. Thank you, Leslie. Numbering as many as 4 million bulbs, and he spent his nights compiling a history of their origins and their culture. This he published in 1884 under the deliberately antiquated title of Ye Narcissus, or Daffodil Flower and His Roots. He retired in 1887, and he went to Spain and Portugal searching for new narcissus, crossing the Alps and the Pyrenees by donkey, cloaked in a blanket like Sancho Panza, and being mistaken for a bandit. So although he was this kind of skilled horticulturalist, Barr was also quick to recognise the impact of art and aesthetics on plant fashion. He recalled in 1900 that Oscar Wilde used to lecture on aesthetic colours, and to him we owe more than anyone else the taste for yellow. He took the sunflower but said that it's too lumpy, and people soon got tired of sunflowers. Then my daffodils came, and they came to stay. Fields of flowers become a reality each spring in the Isles of Scilly in the Victorian era, where in 1875 the mild climate, the Isles of Scilly, by the way, are off the coast of Cornwall at the bottom of England, right at the end. So the mild climate compared with a new weekly packet boat to the mainland and a direct rail link from Penzance to London, which opened in 1859, opened by William Trevilick to try his kind of luck as the booming cut of the flower market at Covent Garden. So 30 bunches of wild narcissi in a hat box waited nervously for news of his enterprise. The blooms were a sensation. By 1889, almost 200 tons of flowers were being shipped each season, transforming the island's economy and their landscape. So Scilly White, or Scilly d'Or, filled every field, and the families came together to plant and harvest, bunch and pack. So we've got a lovely sort of woodcut style image of people hand picking. Look at that. That's on the Isles of Scilly. Beautiful. I love that. I mean, I have that on my wall tomorrow. I don't know where it comes from. I've just found it online. Love that. So that's the Isles of Scilly, which is famous for kind of be able to grow anything on the Isles of Scilly. It's more sunshine than anywhere else in the kind of British Isles. So most recommended if you're ever in that part of the world. Difficult to get to, has to be said. You get there by kind of helicopter, or the easiest way to get there is via helicopter. So in World War II, when flower production in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly was threatened by wartime control on growing and transporting flowers, the plucky islanders sent scented narcissi to Winston Churchill, no less, who responded, "These people must be enabled to grow their flowers and send them to London to cheer us up so much in these dark days." So even Winston Churchill knew the value of daffodils. So the bright and kind of cheerful appearance of daffodils is a powerful symbol of hope and optimism. Their radiant colours and delicate fragrance uplift spirits and evoke a sense of joy and positivity. Daffodils inspire us to embrace life's challenges with a positive outlook and remind us that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of hope. The daffodil is also, of course, the national flower of Wales. It's deeply intertwined with the spirit of commemoration of St David's Day on March the 1st. And as the revered patron saint of Wales, St David is said to have adorned himself with daffodils during battles, forging a timeless connection between the flower and Welsh pride. Embracing tradition, it's customary to wear or display daffodils as decorations on this special day, the March the 1st, St David's Day. Sort of paying homage to that rich heritage and the distinct identity of Wales. In modern times, daffodils have become a symbol for hope and support for individuals who are affected by cancer. Again, this is something I wasn't aware of. It's probably my kind of lack of knowledge of the disease, really. But the American Cancer Society, Marie Curie Cancer Care, and the Cancer Council of Australia have all adopted a daffodil as the emblem of their campaigns, representing strength and resilience and the fight against this disease. Daffodil-themed events and fundraisers are held worldwide to raise awareness and provide support to cancer patients and their family and to raise money for cancer research. In China, daffodils are symbols of good fortune and prosperity, and this is because they flower during the period of Chinese New Year, which again is something I didn't know. In Japan, they symbolise joy and mirth. In France, daffodils are a symbol of hope, while in the Middle East, they are believed to be aphrodisiacs. Daffodils are the birth flower of March, which kind of makes sense, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, being the first month of spring, a bit less sense in the Southern Hemisphere, has to be said, and the traditional flower of the 10th wedding anniversary. If you know anybody who's coming to their 10th wedding anniversary, mine's long since passed, a bunch of daffodils is the appropriate gift to send them. So they've been celebrating in literature and art for centuries. One of those famous literary references, of course, is to be found in William Wordsworth's "I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud." And in this poem, Wordsworth describes the sight of a field of daffodils, capturing the beauty and tranquility of nature. And daffodils continue to inspire poets, artists and writers, symbolising the essence of spring and the fleeting moments of beauty in life. He's painting When Flowers Were Shown in 1911, Lawrence Alma Tadema. I'll just bring that up for you. It's another painting you might not be familiar with, but I like it a lot. So he kind of fills his canvas here with garlands of daffodils and nymphs, of course, as the kind of three female followers of the Greek god of wine celebrate the ritual of rebirth. Artists such as Berthe Morisot, who's a wonderful impressionist, you might not know so much about her because it's usually, as ever, the fellas that tend to get the notice, but here is her painting of daffodils. But both Berthe Morisot and Claude Monet were also drawn to the flowers. Monet scarted his own narcissi in the grasses at his garden at Giverny, part of the kind of fashion for naturalisation championed by the English horticulturalist William Robinson. But this painting here is one of kind of Morisot's most famous, painted in 1885, and the daffodils, of course, cast their sunshine indoors and form a kind of neat globe that mirrors the bowl they're placed in, but of course as well echoes of the sun. So daffodils play a kind of prominent role in various festivals as well, and celebrations. In the United States, the National Daffodil Festival in Gloucester, Virginia. Has anyone been to Gloucester, Virginia, to be the National Daffodil Festival? I hear they do not celebrate in style there. It's a vibrant event that celebrates the arrival of spring with parades, art exhibitions and live performances. Similarly, in the United Kingdom, and I was aware of this one, the Daffodil Festival at Thriplo attracts visitors who come to admire the stunning displays of daffodils and participate in traditional kind of festivities. So they see the village sign of Thriplo, and how lovely that looks. So let's say. So it's not until the 19th century that actually classification of many of the Narcissus species comes to be kind of undertaken. And although the kind of name of daffodil is often applied only to the larger kind of trumpet-flowered cultivars, with the sort of short-cupped and multi-headed cultivar shredders narcissi, breeders and other enthusiasts refer to all these kinds as daffodils, which isn't especially helpful, it has to be said. So I'm struggling again to get rid of my screen. So due to their popularity as cultivated plants, thousands of cultivars have been bred. And what they call the perianths, the petals, are mostly yellow or white. So we're coming close and we can sort of see what we're kind of talking about here. And occasionally, though, they can be orange, green, red, or a combination of all these colours. So it really is a quite unusual array of colours. Not just yellow. We think it's all yellow, but we shouldn't do. So I'm really... here we are. So today, many cultivars have brightly coloured coronas. So the corona is the cup, which have a yellow, white, pink, orange, red, or a combination of these. And daffodils are usually bright yellow or all white, but also maybe white or yellow with a contrasting pink, orange, or yellow corona, which of course is the middle part of the flower. So the yellow daffodil, the all-yellow daffodils, let's find an all-yellow daffodil, so we haven't really got many on here. Here's one. So full, proper, all-yellow, is the most common daffodil colour, flower in existence. It's seen as a kind of symbol of new beginnings, and the daffodil flower is often given as a wedding gift to newlyweds. Now, pink daffodils are the least common of the three varieties. I don't know if you've seen a pink daffodil, but let's bring on it. They're really lovely. It's not really something that you see very often. So they're over 100 years old, but have still managed to remain sort of pretty uncommon. I don't think they're particularly easy to breed, or so not commercially. So the pink-coloured daffodil apparently represents pride or uniqueness. Next in parallel to in popularity to the yellow daffodil is the white daffodil. And there's kind of various versions of white, as you can see here. Often they are kind of two-tone, but some of them are, in reverse. Sometimes you've got the yellow leaves in the pale middle, or the other way around. Sometimes, so if you kind of look around up here, again, I'll just try and get rid of that for us now. So all these kind of varieties have been kind of around really for it's 100, 150 years or so. And according to kind of daffodil symbolism, white daffodils symbolise purity. And they can also represent, though, a kind of complete lack of vanity and possible kind of selfishness. So there's all sorts of meanings that are kind of sort of shot through into these daffodils. So the daffodil, of course, is very easily recognisable thanks to its kind of unique trumpet-shaped corona. So let's just be clear what we're talking about here. So the corona is this section that's kind of sticking outwards here. And given it's a kind of flower petal, you might expect it to be very delicate, but I'm sure that many of you will know they're actually quite surprisingly kind of firm, really, sort of springy. In the UK, daffodils are sometimes called Lent lilies because they tend to bloom between Ash Wednesday and Easter. Although the family to which they believe that Amaryllis, I can't pronounce it. It's like Amaryllis, but acidy on the end of it or something. Which kind of houses daffodils, was once combined with the lily family. But daffodils are not a type of Lilium genus, but rather Narcissus genus. So the question some people ask then is are Narcissus and daffodils the same? And there's some confusion about whether the Narcissus and the daffodil are the same flowers. And the names are often used interchangeably. Here's a nice, really pretty, I think, combination. Sort of fairly pale yellow. So I really like that one. So technically speaking, yes, daffodils and narcissi are the same. Daffodil is the common name given to flowers in the genus Narcissus. The Latin name for the common wild daffodil is Narcissus pseudo-narcissus. And other well-known flowers in this genus include jonquils, which is Narcissus jonquilla, which are usually the cut flowers that you find at a florist. And paper whites, Narcissus papyraceus, papyrus of course meaning paper, and both these may be called daffodils. Just where the daffodil got its name is unclear. The name is possibly derived from the Old English word daffodil, which means that which comes early, or early comer. So this makes sense given the way the flower usually blooms early ahead of the spring. It may also be a variation of the Latin word daffodilus or daffodilus, which is another type of flowering plant native to temperate parts of Europe. So all parts of the daffodil are toxic to humans, dogs, cats and horses. The plant contains a chemical known as glycerin, which can induce severe gastrointestinal symptoms if consumed. And the most toxic part of the plant is the bulb, which is kind of problematic because sometimes people mistake it for an onion bulb. The plant contains microscopic needle-shaped crystals of calcium oxalate, which tend to irritate the skin, nose and throat. Sometimes simply touching or even just sniffing daffodils can cause a skin rash, known as daffodil picker's rash, and as well as pain and burning in the mouth, nose and throat. But despite all this, daffodils were once used as traditional medicine to induce vomiting, cause numbness and more. Now interestingly, daffodils also contain an alkaloid chemical called glutamine, which is known to slow the progress of Alzheimer's disease. So whilst the compound can be synthesized nowadays, daffodils are still grown and harvested for this chemical and used in the treatment of Alzheimer's. Isn't that fascinating? Have you any idea? I wasn't really that aware of the connection with cancer, let alone the connection with Alzheimer's. So it's incredible, really. So most daffodils produce a fragrance that some find enjoyable, others detest, and others can't smell. Is there anybody out there that is in the kind of cohort of people that simply can't detect the aroma of daffodils? It's kind of interesting. But there's a small amount of people that find them really deeply unpleasant. But daffodils have been widely cherished, really, by gardens and landscapes. Their beauty, versatility, their ease of cultivation, and they're a popular choice for creating stunning displays in gardens, in parks, public spaces, and during the spring season. So, as here in York, as we can see, they're lovely. So daffodils' kind of vibrant colours and diverse varieties make them a favourite flower, adding splashes of brightness and charm to landscapes. Their low maintenance nature and ability to naturalise makes them a reliable choice for both the professional and amateur gardeners. And the plant reproduces in two different ways, forming the familiar offsets to the bulbs, which are then divided and planted elsewhere, but also by a seed. So Leslie didn't know they had any scent, so Leslie is part of that group who isn't able to smell. Anybody in the group that finds them an intensely vulgar and offensive to the nostrils? Because, as I say, these are the kind of genetic varieties that probably tell us which tribe of Homo sapiens we kind of came from. That we have these kind of little genetic characters, the character readers. They're going to bugger off. Sorry, a goose there telling me to do one. So I replied in kind. So we've got a few minutes left of our tour. I'm just going to finish up over here. I'll try and give you, because hopefully you feel like you've had your money's worth of daffodils by now. We started off pretty poorly, it has to be said, at Clifford's Tower, but I feel we've more than made up for it in both number and variety and richness ever since. So, unlike the kind of larger and showier hybrids, the species that produce seed take about 5 years to reach blooming size. And this is why we're left undisturbed. Large colonies can take over abandoned home sites, cemeteries and fields. So they do have, so Trace has got an earthly faint perfume odour. Interesting. As I say, amongst you, if you talk about this, you'll find that we all think that we're all experiencing the same, and we don't. It's fascinating. So the bulbs that do best when planted are about kind of 3 times the depth in well-drained soil. So if you look to plant them, about 3 times the depth of the bulbs, to put them well-drained soil, and you'll get the most blooms in the area that gets the most sun. So as we've seen as we've gone round the bits, so even this tree here, look at the impact of the tree here. It's blocking the sun for some of the day. Behind it you see a bald patch. Where there's no tree, we see, so this soil's all the same, right? So consequently, just shows. So the Reverend George Herbert Engelhart is credited as the father of the modern daffodil, and he registered 720 new daffodil varieties between 1882 and 1923, although only around 30 are still commercially available. And the Narcissus poeticus species is the most well-known of the ones that he developed. So a method of classifying daffodils based on their different forms and origins was developed by the Royal Horticultural Society Daffodil Committee back in 1950. And altogether, there are 13 different divisions, and they're still used today. But according to the kind of National Trust, I was looking on their website, only really 3 are widely used, or certainly commercially anyway. Divisions 2, 3, and 4. So come down here, so there's some very low, and there's some really nice distinct colours here. So Type 2, Division 2 daffodils are far away the most common. They're known as large cupped blooms, and essentially it's what we're looking at here. So these are all Division 2. Around 45% of all varieties are Division 2. Narcissus California, I'll kind of bring you a picture of that. This is the most kind of widely grown commercially. That is a classic Division 2. So that's California. One of those popular varieties grown commercially. So obviously the commercial ones are because they are robust, long flowering, etc., etc. You know, kind of high yielding, and this, that, and the other. So you know that's kind of the things obviously they're looking out for. Isn't just what colour is it? It's how long will it last, and all that kind of stuff. So Division 3 type daffodils are the small cupped daffodils. So see if we can see a small cupped one. And yes, here's some smaller ones down here. So you can see immediately, just compare the corona there to its bigger cousin. So we've got a Type 3 one here, and they seem to stem from the development of the Narcissus poeticus, so the poet's Narcissus in the Victorian era. So they've got stronger coloured cups and paler petals. One of those popular varieties is Narcissus Seagull. So I've got a picture of Narcissus Seagull. We'll bring that up for you if we can. So Narcissus Seagull is very similar to the one we're looking at here, actually. In fact, this may obviously be Narcissus Seagull. I think it probably is. So that is the most kind of commercially viable kind of product. And that's been available since 1890. My gimbal's just going, but we're nearly at the end, so I'm not going to bother worrying about that. Sorry, just plug my microphone back in. Just give me one sec, because I've lost the gimbal. It happens from time to time. I'm about to say, well, we're almost done here, so I think I'll just hold it like that, and we can manage, I'm sure. So the final classification, Division 4, covers doubles. And doubles kind of vary enormously in their form and can be single or multi-headed. So I can't see any doubles on here. I've got a picture of a double, but let's just try and get rid of this one. But as I say, I have lost the gimbal right now, so losing the gimbal basically means that it's flopped backwards. There's a double. So some of these are very old. This image here is as butter and eggs. The variety dates back to the 17th century. So given the source of its name through Narcissus, in the language of flowers, really, the daffodil is historically a symbol of selfishness. But few of us associate this flower with negative meaning. Today it's a symbol of hope and positivity. But if we sort of return to, of course, the most popular daffodil meaning, we can find other aspects as well. So, for instance, if you gave somebody a daffodil flower to a person you loved, you could send a message that this person's behaviour is too selfish. Or maybe you don't want the relationship to end yet, so a daffodil could be like indication you're hoping for change. So to kind of wrap up, and it is lovely, it's lovely colours here. Daffodils, with their kind of enchanting blooms and symbolic significance, continue to captivate hearts and minds as they have done for thousands of years, evoking feelings of hope and joy and new beginnings. So whether gifted to celebrate special occasions or admired in nature's landscapes, daffodils remind us of the beauty that emerges after the cold winter months. So let us embrace the symbolism and the allure of daffodils and allow them to inspire us to cultivate optimism, embrace change, and to cherish the simple joys of life. So I do hope you've enjoyed our tour. Tales, who thought it was impossible to talk about daffodils for an hour? Well, I did until earlier this week, but I kind of set myself that challenge and thought, let us see if it's possible to write an entire tour about daffodils, and I hope you'll agree, I just about managed to pull that off. So apologies for the sparsity of the daffodils at the top of the show, as you might say, at Clifford Sower, but hopefully, as I say, we've more than made up for it elsewhere. So there you go. That is the history and cultural significance and legends, myths of the daffodils in 1 hour. From York, from me to you, thank you and good night. Bye-bye.